Firstly, let's consider risk assessments. A person-centered risk assessment, also referred to as a PCRA, should be considered when a learner's presentation poses an ongoing risk to the health, safety and well-being of themselves and/or other members of the school community, and where implementation of school policies so far has had little or indeed no remedial effect. As practitioners within education, we have a duty to satisfy the child's right to education, see UNCRC Article 28, and consistent with the goal of full inclusion, we will provide and support individual requirements, see UNCRPD Article 24. In accordance with GARFEC, Aberdeen City Council has a vision of being compassionate and connected, promoting the rights of those under 18 while making use of sound assessment and planning to reduce risk and maximise positive impact. The PCRA is a tool for schools to evidence this vision. A PCRA may be appropriate for learners who exist with perceived vulnerabilities or are indeed exposed to risk, such as young carers, looked after young people, those that are lonely or socially isolated, refugees, asylum seekers, perhaps young people affected by bullying or prejudice based on age, sex, gender, sexual orientation, race, culture, religion, background, or disability. Those that are affected by harmful sexualized behavior or substance misuse. Even those supported by enhanced transition planning, the location, the stage, the timing. Those that are affected by loss or bereavement, or perhaps if they've been impacted by trauma. The request for assistance or RFA process is aided by the submission of a multi-agency child's plan, which contains a PCRA in the action plan section. The vulnerability and risk assessment process and ensuing management of risk is part of the GARFIC and child's plan process. The process of assessing and managing vulnerability or behaviour of concern should be transparent, proportionate, and should place the child or young person at the centre of decision making. The main purpose of a person-centred risk assessment is to make a rational assessment of all available information in as much detail as possible within the context of the child or young person's life and circumstances. Families and learners, in line with GARFIC practice, should, as far as possible, engage in assessment, planning and decision making. Learners should be given a voice, the opportunity to gain insight into the impact of their situation and behaviour on themselves and the world around them, to help them understand why a plan is required and of benefit to them. The process should consider the National Practice Model, GARFIC, Wellbeing Indicators, My World Triangle and Resilience Matrix as appropriate. These should help not overly complicate the process. Where to begin? We need a careful, solution-focused consideration of the following. What are the specific concerns around who is at risk of vulnerability or harm, and how? What strengths can be identified and used to advantage? What preventative, protective and motivational factors already exist and work? What else could be put in place? When discussing an initial vulnerability risk assessment, we should think about the mental, emotional and physical condition of the young person. Do they have any additional support needs? These could be social, emotional or mental health needs, the effect of any medical conditions or the ingestion of drugs, alcohol or medicines. What are the stress level of the young person like? Are they hindering their ability to access learning? Does the child or young person have a history of behaviour concerns or distress? What can we discover from investigating these? The possibility that the child or young person considers others as a threat due to experiences. Responses which are likely to be exhibited by the pupil in question. Can we preempt, prevent, or promote these if they are positive behaviours? Findings should be recorded on a child's plan, wellbeing assessment format. So what tools do we have to help? What information do we currently hold? Perhaps on a child's plan or IEP. We can use this information as a foundation for moving forward. We also need to reflect on our own efficiency. Are all staff members aware of de-escalation strategies contained within current plans? How good is our organisational awareness of attachment and trauma as a whole? Are we a compassionate and connected establishment? Is this consistently applied? How confident are we that the actions and approaches identified in the plan will be implemented consistently and fairly? How do we assess this? How do we ensure this? Do we have a clear understanding and awareness of potential systemic failures? Do we use consistent language when dealing with difficult situations that we know the child or young person will respond to? Have we considered fully possible underlying issues, rejection, attachment, adverse childhood experience, the additional support needs? Are we making full use of vulnerability and resilience data? There are a variety of tools and methods which may help gather, organise and analyse the information. Here are some. You may wish to begin with, what do we already know? Do they have a plan already? Is it comprehensive? Should we look at the wellbeing indicators and use the GIRFIC tools, the resilience matrix, for example? The initial vulnerability risk assessment checklist for schools has been used previously and may look familiar to you. It might be helpful as a tool to analyse the types of behaviour seen and begin to consider patterns and themes as well as triggers that we could prevent to help consider proactive strategies. The antecedent behaviour consequence or ABC model for understanding and managing behaviour is at the core of many effective behavioural strategies. It provides a framework for reflection after a situation has happened with a view to preventing it happening again in future. It can help us to understand the following. Does it happen at a particular time or place? Is there something usually going on immediately before or after? Is there any way of predicting it? Are there circumstances which make the behaviour more likely to occur? It is a useful way of thinking about what drives a child or young person's behaviour. It starts with the premise that the majority of behaviour is functional. It encourages the belief that if behaviour has been learned, it can indeed be unlearned. ABC data gathering should be holistic and consider all systems around the learner, i.e. the individual, their family, peers, the wider community, school. For example, in the ABC model, issues may occur in the family home before school, and there may be inadvertent reinforcing consequences from family after school. Therefore, it is important to get information from home as well and ensure the home-school link is emphasised. Also in relation to intervention planning to ensure consistent messages. Information gathering is vital to developing an effective PCRA for the child or young person. The PCRA directs us and asks us to consider specific areas: environmental factors, pupil learning needs, staff training and support needs, engagement with families and carers, focus supports, and contingency planning when things don't quite work out. An information gathering grid can be used to map out what we know about the learner, their circumstances, and also highlight where we are missing information and we need to investigate further. In good practice, we would measure risk and vulnerability prior to intervention and then measure again post-intervention. A good tool for measuring risk is a rating scale, previously used by Aberdeen City Council. It's a great starting point, but simply attributing a number or colour to a risk or vulnerability will not constitute a carefully considered assessment. We need to take the time when instances first happen to open up conversation, to develop and create a proactive, efficient, effective plan that has the highest likelihood of success. The Brook traffic light tool provides us with a good example of a rating scale, as the name would suggest, using traffic light colours. It presents sexual behaviours within 4 age categories to aid the assessment of developmental appropriateness. All green, amber and red behaviours require some form of attention and response, but the type of intervention will vary according to the behaviour, just as your interventions will be created to suit the individual needs of the children and young people in your care. How information gathered is not a prescriptive process. It is up to you. How all parties contribute is also not prescriptive. A blend of meetings, recorded conversations, the use of technology and sharing drafts for comments are all acceptable actions. It is about including all who can help and ensuring they feel empowered and enabled to contribute. Let's look at the strengths and concerns and the action plan. The PCRA is recognised within a child's plan by the explicit references to and actions recorded under the PCRA headings. Categories are designed to ensure comprehensive consideration of the situation. It is important not to consider the process as a series of boxes to simply fill. PCRA assessment and actions are recorded in the child's plan. This means that they are available on CMIS so they can be accessed readily when required, during holiday periods, for example. When populating the child's plan PCRA action plan, we must systematically consider these areas to identify what actions or interventions are necessary to mitigate risk. This ensures a comprehensive assessment and understanding. It may be that some of the categories overlap. Please remember the PCRA categories are environmental factors, pupil learning needs, staff training and support needs, engagement with families and carers, focus supports, and a contingency plan. Let's think about environmental factors. We have to give thought to the setting conditions within the physical environment and what surrounds our learner. An environmental audit may often uncover potential triggers which we have not noticed or previously overlooked. Do we require alterations to a space to maximise its appropriateness for meeting the needs of a pupil? Are alterations to windows, doors required to improve security? Sometimes it's better to give things a go, see if they make a difference, and if they don't, we continue to adapt and try. The physical environment may affect the likelihood of incidents and the ease at which staff can respond to them. You must ensure the work environment is as safe and secure as possible to reduce the risk of behaviour of concern to the children, to the staff, to yourself. Vulnerability and risk assessment plans should consider the space and layout, the lighting, decoration and furnishings. It is important to create a calm environment. Think about the noise, sensory stimulus. Where is the learner sitting? What and who are around them? Consistency of visual supports, of routines. Is life in school predictable for that pupil? Does it feel secure? An environmental audit may support thinking around this. Contextual considerations. Perhaps we should pay attention to pupils' place in the wider context of the school community and culture. Is it necessary to consider issues such as the perceptions of peers, families, community, and what actions will be required to respond and address concerns? Are there issues around social media? The need for easy communication between staff while retaining privacy, for example, awareness of handover information not being shared verbally in front of pupils, and a use of more discreet methods of communication, perhaps an email or homeschool log. Perhaps these questions make us think about schools' ethos and values. Environmental factors fall within the proactive category of planning and are long-term interventions. In other words, the actions may take time to deliver their full impact. Pupil learning needs should be considered in the widest sense. For example, a pupil's emotional literacy, social competence, or specific skills deficit would be a valid learning need and would warrant planned interventions to address the need. Don't focus just on the academics. Adaptations to learning and teaching to meet learning style needs need to be considered here. Is there appropriate differentiation or another curricular adaptation that we could consider? The restorative process would also potentially feature here, as the acquisition of empathy and ability to take responsibility for one's actions may also be classed as a learning need. Learning opportunities could also include pupil involvement, give them a voice in the planning of what proactive and reactive strategies would work best for them. Pupil learning needs falls within the proactive category of planning and, just like environmental factors, are long-term interventions. They do not happen overnight. They take reflection, adaptation, and time. Staff members need to be supported in their work with children and young people and should receive appropriate guidance and training. The assessment of risk may identify training needs. It's a helpful tool. Training in the prevention and management of behaviour of concern can provide employees with appropriate skills to reduce or diffuse potential incidents. This will be identified through the vulnerability risk assessment and child's plan process. Training in the principles of managing behaviour of concern may include some or all of the following. What may drive behaviours of concern? Do we have a recognition of the warning signs or triggers? Are staff aware of these? Do they have an understanding of a potential assault cycle? The A, B, C of a child's processing. Relevant interpersonal skills. Are staff aware of non-verbal communication as well as verbal and the effects this can have on the reaction of a child? Do they have de-escalation techniques suitable for the children in their care? Is it necessary for them to have physical intervention training? Do they have details of local working practice, procedures and control measures in order to ensure they are following policy correctly? Do they understand the methods of incident reporting procedures through UHR and the importance of logging events in order to provide the best support for the child and create the bigger picture? All staff members who have the potential to be involved in an incident should have the opportunity to receive training, but you must ensure the level of training provided to staff reflects the specific needs of the work activities. Don't train all for training's sake. For example, staff members responsible for pupils who present a low risk of aggressive behaviour may only require basic de-escalation training. Staff members responsible for pupils that present a more serious risk of physical aggression may also need training in the physical intervention techniques, as well as de-escalation training. Think about the individual needs of your staff, just as you consider the individual needs of your learners. Staff exposed to the risk of behaviour of concern need training on procedures in the event of an incident and on what they must do to protect themselves, the child, and the school community. It is important that they're aware of the criteria for initiating procedures and are free to do so when they feel vulnerable. Staff members are also entitled to personal and emotional support, and this is identified in guidance on managerial responsibilities and from corporate services. Please ensure your staff are aware of the support available to them. Further information is available on SharePoint if needed. Staff support and training needs fall within the proactive category of planning and are again long-term interventions. It may take some time for the full benefit of interventions to emerge. We need to take the opportunity to include families and carers when discussing strategies and learning that benefit children and young people in school. Areas such as de-escalation, ABC recording, as well as many other approaches are equally helpful in the home setting, as may measures which are used in the home be appropriate to be applied in school. By fully engaging families and carers as members of the team supporting the child, giving them the opportunity to increase their confidence as well as signposting supports they may access will ultimately benefit all concerned. Focus supports prompts us to consider what intensive supports need to be implemented to maximise the reduction of risks in the shortest, most efficient timescale. Focus supports tend to be more intensive and are generally not desirable as a long-term solution. Examples of focus support may be staff ratio increase, a use of a different learning area within the school, a therapeutic intervention, support from partnership forum or third sector parties. Modified school timetable or a flexible timetable. This needs to be agreed by the quality improvement officer and parent or carer. Focus supports are within the proactive category and are generally short or medium-term interventions. This being said, some pupils will require focus supports for longer periods, but this should be as a result of an ongoing identification of need and assessment of vulnerability and risk. The plan should be reviewed to ensure it still meets the ongoing need. When a vulnerability risk assessment identifies that there is potential for a serious incident to occur, it is essential that the plan identifies very clearly what needs to be in place to ensure an appropriate, proportionate response. Identifying who is to be called for and how must be carefully considered and agreed. Consideration should be given to outs, whereby a learner is given options to retreat to a safe place or a go-to person is sought to facilitate a de-escalation. This is a strategy like any other. The pupil's involvement in all areas of vulnerability risk assessment is vital and may be crucial when we are considering what reactive strategies would be most effective. If they buy in to these strategies, they have far more likelihood of working. In the planning for reactive strategies, we need to consider the mitigating effects of the previous proactive strategies and respond proportionately to contingency planning. It may also be necessary to audit staff skills and competencies and feed this data into the learning and training section of the plan to address longer-term needs. It is essential that all necessary reporting and recording procedures are adhered. All of these points need communicated to all staff supporting the child. Where there has been an incident, a member of senior staff should take time to debrief staff and offer support. Depending on the needs of the learner, a restorative meeting should be offered if appropriate. Once the team have the opportunity to recover from any immediate emotional impact, there should be a review of what took place. Perhaps an ABC chart could be filled out. Consider if the current plan was followed and alter the plan as necessary. Incidents should be recorded appropriately to create a bigger picture of need. The child's plan is a live document and must be regularly reviewed and updated for it to be effective. Any significant change, near miss or incident must result in the documentation being updated and planned interventions being reviewed. We have a duty as educators to do so. While a plan to mitigate risk is in place, data on the usefulness of actions must be recorded and collated. It's important to be as transparent as we can. Frequency and severity of incidents should be recorded. Positive behaviour monitoring and recording systems should also be in place. Making sure that partners to the plan are kept informed of progress is essential. Families will be enabled to support plans when we share news of progress and positives as well as concerns. When identifying what may trigger an early review of the child's plan, it is appropriate to cite any significant event, incident, near miss, change of plan, transition, alteration to measures or change of circumstance, so anyone accessing the plan gets an up-to-date picture of what is happening. If a child's plan is recommended, this should be facilitated by a competent person in full accordance with child's plan procedures. The outcomes of the child's plan within the SAFE indicator should then be proportionately disseminated to all relevant staff, including support staff, supply, temporary and student teachers. Consideration must be given to the level of access to information in the plan and confidentiality protected. Access to sensitive information should be proportionate and justifiable. Don't be afraid to share. Just ensure you can justify the reasons why this has happened. For example, if an agreed action in a plan is that the school office staff members are to call for a PCRA to meet a child when they arrive with the parent each morning, then there is no need for the full plan to be shared with that staff group. However, they must be aware of the important responsibility they have for ensuring that the child is met each day to be escorted into school, and that this is a part of a recorded plan and must be kept consistent. All staff who may potentially be exposed to behaviour of concern should know the potential trigger situations and the relevant agreed measures identified in the child's plan. Staff should be protected. This may include, for example, all the senior leadership team if they are likely to be called to an incident. It is important that those who have a specific responsibility for an agreed action within the plan have adequate and appropriate access to the information they need whilst confidentiality and the dignity of the learner is maintained. So, let's think about areas to consider of the child's plan. Are all staff members aware of de-escalation strategies? How good is our organisational awareness of attachment and trauma? How confident are we that the actions and approaches identified in the plan will be implemented consistently and fairly? Do we have a clear understanding and awareness of potential systemic failure? Do we have a shared ethos in how we support our pupils and colleagues? And do we use fair and consistent language when dealing with difficult situations? Consistency and predictability reduces anxiety and has positive impact on behaviour. Have we given full consideration to possible underlying issues? Rejection, attachment, adverse childhood experience, additional support needs. Are we making full use of vulnerability and resilience data we already have access to? Identifying appropriate control measures is part of the vulnerability risk assessment process. There are many precautions that can help lower anxiety and distress and prevent and control violence and aggression. Further information on this is in the PCRA guidance. Employees may need to contact someone for assistance. How do you ensure the safety provision for your staff? The need for personal communication devices may form part of a number of reasonable control measures to help manage the risk. These may include telephones, mobile phones, and pagers. Sometimes walkie-talkies are obtrusive and can exacerbate situations unintentionally when they don't work or make a sudden noise. Please access the links on this slide for any further information. The focus can be found in the title of the link. Before closing this resource, complete the post-training requirement. This can be accessed again using the link or the QR code. These questions are similar to the pre-training requirement and can be used as a comparison. This is useful when informing your own practice and giving us a snapshot of any further training we can offer in future. Your feedback is much appreciated. Thank you for accessing ACC Supporting Learners.